Hey, welcome folks. So, chastening opening night for Ireland at the Stade de France. This 18-month, 2-year sense now that Ireland are a team in decline was very much copper fastened. They are no longer at the top table of rugby, that's for sure. France, a different level entirely. So we're going to get into it with Ian Madigan in a moment. Our rugby coverage in Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia. They sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels. Grassroots with the AIL. They are official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht, the Irish men's and women's teams, and their Rugby for All initiative supports inclusion, welcoming everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. Energia.ie/rugby, the place to go for exclusive rugby partnerships. Just before we get Ian's thoughts, here is, and he really was, I mean, you could just see it in his face, just a kind of, crestfallen almost, Andy Farrell.
Yeah, obviously very disappointed. Through something that I never thought we'd be saying about this Irish team, you know, with a little bit of lack of intent in that first half, and missed tackles or winning the scraps on the floor or winning the fight in the air. It's just intention, and if that's lacking, you're not going to win in any international game. Never mind one in Paris.
Ian Madigan, welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, delighted to be on. Well done last night. Really enjoyed the coverage on Virgin.
Well, we've had lots of emails in about the coverage on Virgin, which we went through in bits and bobs, ranging from disgust at what I was wearing to does nobody shave on your panel, etc. So, the people have spoken. We went through those in a separate podcast. Something I never thought I would say about an Irish team, a lack of intent.
Yeah, I think if you compare it to a boxing match, which there's plenty of similarities with rugby, we didn't really throw a punch for the first 50 minutes. And when I say throw a punch, what does that mean? Dominant tackles, line breaks, offloads, winning the aerial duels. They're all punches that set you up for success. And at 50 minutes or 48 minutes after they'd scored that try in the second half, the game is very much over. They've secured the bonus point, and it was a valiant effort to kind of fight our way back into it, and arguably could have got a third try and push for a fourth. And, then you're looking at a try losing bonus point, potentially 2 losing bonus points, which, as Andy Farrell mentioned post game, is really important in this competition. But to come away after all that effort, empty handed, and 20 odd points down on points difference, that's a really poor start to the competition, and it's left us an absolute mountain to climb to try and get as high up that table as possible. I think the goal now has got to be second place and a triple crown.
Let's start with Irish defence for a second, because obviously it was under huge pressure in that first half. It was 22-0 at half time. I've 2 abiding memories of the first half from a defensive point of view. France in open, loose play, almost even in their own half at times, or certainly even from halfway, and even then being a sense of, oh God, danger here. Like even 2 minutes into the game, almost scoring in the left corner. And the other memory being France just camped in the Irish half, around the Irish 22, and Dupont's just like bouncing off tackles. Nobody can get a hand on him. They're an Irish soak tackle, a little offload, a little bit of footwork, another offload, the Irish line getting kind of disjointed and messed up, and just like the Stade de France dancing, and just them just like, to continue the boxing analogy, we're that little small bag, and they're like Rocky, just giving just on top of us and like enjoying it.
Yeah, and it looked that way. I think it was Galtier said after the game, for the first 50 minutes, they forgot that they were playing Ireland. And I think you can kind of read into that. They were just really enjoying it. And large parts of that is the opportunities that Ireland were presenting them. I think as a team, we're caught in between systems and multiple systems at that. So if you look at the Leinster defensive system, one of their real key pillars is counter-rucking. So by counter-rucking, you're not necessarily going to get the same amount of turnovers as a poach threat team, a team that's just looking to target the ball on the ground. But what it does give you is it significantly slows down the opposition ruck ball.
Okay, so I stopped you there a sec. So
yeah,
a counter-rucking team is like bodies flying in, slow them down, make it messy. A poach team is trying to actually get their hands on the ball.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the difference is with the poach, you have a split second to get on the ball. You've either won the space or you haven't. But if you haven't, you're cleared out within a second. Whereas if you're a counter ruck team, like the goal is to drive over the other side of the ruck and present the ball for your own scrum half. That doesn't happen too often. But that's the best possible outcome. The goal of it is to slow the opposition ruck ball down. And what does that do? It gives your teammates, the other defenders, time to get set. Time to get set allows you to get your spacing right and allows you to get off the line really quickly in a cohesive fashion. Ireland are a poaching team. And with that, look, we had some success. I think we'd maybe 3 or 4 turnovers throughout the game. But even those turnovers that we got, we didn't make much use of them. We didn't like when we turned the ball over to France, they punished us because that's what they're conditioned to do when they're playing with Toulouse and Bordeaux. That's how they play the game. It's this kind of rope a dope. They turn it over and they just ignite. But Ireland, by going for the poaches, not getting them, we just couldn't get set. And one of the analogies one of the defensive coaches I had used was a good defensive system is great, but you also have to be an accordion player as well. And what I mean by that is you need to know in certain instances, we need to get really tight and really compressed in our defense and get off the line really hard. That inevitably is going to be closer to your own try line. Or if you've got a team camped up close to the touchline and you've made a dominant tackle, it's going to be really difficult for a team to go around you when that's happened. But there's also instances when the accordion needs to open up and you need to have bigger spacings and you need to fill the field. And Ireland got exposed by being caught between those two systems and not being reactive enough. You think of, Biel Barry's try. So like it comes off Prendergast fly hacking it when he's concerned that he's going to either land into touch or be tackled into touch. He fly hacks it down and Ireland just keep their defensive width, but the danger is completely on the touchline. You need to compress your defense there. Prendergast misses a tackle, then makes a tackle. Gibson Park's involved, and there's just too much space there when you're dealing with speedsters like Ramos and Biel Barry. And then on the flip side of it, when we needed to compress our defense and get bodies in front, we didn't do that. And the yards after contact, France were able to ascertain by taking on our defense. That's what kept them on the front foot for the entirety of that first half.
Okay. And are you happy with Ireland as a poaching team? Do you think counter-rucking team or counter-attacking, counter-rucking approach is the better way to go, or?
I think in the ideal world, you have a balance of the two.
Okay.
And you know that when a dominant tackle comes in, now look, we weren't. It's not that this Irish team can't counter ruck. We weren't getting dominant tackles, so that's usually the green light to get in and counter ruck. Any player worth their salt will just pile in, and they'll know that the referee is only really looking at the team in possession for infringements. You can get away with a huge amount, and the French did that and did that really well. Like there was definitely ones that were right on the line. Is the counter rucking player putting his hands on the ground? Is he off his feet? But if a dominant tackle's come in, the referee's not really looking at it. So it does start with that. But my point is, you want to have a balance of knowing when to be a counter-rucking team and when to be a poaching team.
Okay.
The issue is, if you're poaching, Joe, and you're not coming up with turnovers, regularly enough, what is that doing to your defensive width? It's shortening your defensive line, and it's giving the opposition that quick ruck speed ball, which France just thrive on.
So you think last night, maybe somewhere in that first half, if I'm following you, there could have been an argument, or some of the senior players should have said, look, I know we want to get our poaches, but actually they're getting such quick ball. Can we just slow them down at the breakdown? Let's just start counter-rucking. Let's just make it messy and try and slow them down a bit. Is that what someone maybe should have suggested?
I think so. And that's leadership, that's, the game plan is great until, back to the boxing analogy, you get boxed in the face and you've got to change it. You've got to react. Yeah. And it was a wet night as well. So it does favor the counter rucking as opposed to the poaching.
So these things are all interconnected, like fastball, French fastball makes it very hard for Irish line speed to get up because you're almost kind of braced. You're like, oh my God, we can't breathe here. We're suffocated. But would you say last night were Ireland, because it was noticeable after the halftime break, the initial phases, and that's often a good clue as to what was said in the dressing room. Ireland certainly tried to get off the line quicker in defence in the opening minutes of the second half. So that said to me, they said, get in their faces a bit more, get up. Were Ireland trying to play a rush defence, sort of a little bit in between, a bit more cautious? Like what were Ireland trying to do in terms of how they were rushing up on top of French players, do you think?
I think the issue is in your question, Joe. Like, you've seen enough rugby over the years to know what a rush defense looks like, and it didn't look like that last night. But we want, we want to be a team that gets off the line and gets in the opposition faces. But the issue is that there's the capabilities of the players and dealing with fatigue and doing it in a cohesive manner. We're not able to do it consistently. So what that results in, as an attacking player, having a team getting off the line pretty hard, but then sitting, that is actually a lovely picture to attack against, because you know what you're facing. What can actually be really frustrating, and ironic to be referencing Zebra, but they're a team that just solely control. And like the Australians do it, but obviously in a more skilled fashion. And that is actually really difficult to attack against, because you're going from width to width, you're making gradual progress. But what you want is players to jump out of the line and then have dog legs, and then you're looking to expose that with short passing, long passing, creative lines of running. But we're doing neither. So we're getting off the line, and then we're being picked off. And if they can get around us, then our backfield is very disconnected, and it's really hard to save us. Because if you're like Leinster, for example, if they're a rush defense team, we know that. But if the rush defense gets high enough and you still get broken on the outside, the scramble can save you, and it often does with the Leinster defense. But the scramble, the front line of the defense was not getting high enough for the scramble to be able to save us last night.
Okay, so it was almost get off the line because we want to get off the line and stop. And that's you as an attacking 10. When a defence is caught between those two systems, that Australian more drift defence, more controlled defence, or the Leinster rush, South African rush, that in-between hybrid is actually quite nice to play against. France would have enjoyed that. It
is. And you throw in the speed and agility and passing ability of that French backline, they can go lateral, they can go backwards, they can keep the ball alive in contact. And they did that really well last night, and it made us look porous in defence.
And Farrell made a point, offloads are talked about. We'll come to some stats later, I'm sure, but 21 offloads to Ireland's 6. And Farrell was making the point, offloads have the reputation of being almost risky. But he said last night for them, it was not risky play. Their offloads, it wasn't risky what they were doing, because they were earning the right to offload because they won the contact. Farrell's essentially saying it's not a risky thing if you smash over someone or it's a soaked tackle and then your hands are free and you've got your mate inside you. It's the easiest thing in the world to pop it to him and keep it alive. So, I mean, he was even like, he wasn't as annoyed with the missed tackles, he said, and there were 19 of them. He was almost more annoyed with just the lack of dominant hits.
Yeah, it's dominant hits, and it's speed as well. Like if we're on a one-on-one instance and I have speed over you, I can take you on the outside. Yeah, you might be able to scrag me down, but I can offload around your back. And the French did that really well. Leading into this game, so 13 games leading into this one, on average, the French offloaded 40% more than Ireland. In the last 3 games that we've played each other, excluding last night, they average 50% more offloads than us. I was concerned about this going into the game. And last night, the offload, the official stat was 21 offloads to our 6.
Yeah.
So 3.5x. Yeah, it's just so significant. And the reality is, Ireland, we've never really been an offloading team. Like, even, back to Joe Schmidt, it was really around breaking teams down systematically. We didn't need to risk offloads. It was about, going through the phases and then unlocking the code, and we did that really effectively. And you could see that the first and only opportunity we got in the French 22 last night, I think it was on about 6 or 8 minutes. Good line out, good go forward ball, and Prendergast goes to offload it to Josh. I don't think Josh is even expecting an offload. He's just thinking of rooking.
No.
Whereas on the flip side, all the French guys are expecting offloads off the ball carrier.
Do you know what was interesting about that? There's a slow-mo then, and I presume this is what is happening. There's a slow-mo of Van der Fleer, and I presume he's looking at Prendergast, and he's giving him a thumbs up as if to say, good, and it's almost what he's saying there is, God, I wasn't even thinking that was a possibility, but what you did was actually right, but I wasn't with you. Do it again the next time and I'll be more clued in. And that's quite telling that he's like almost shit, that was actually a good idea and I wasn't even with you.
Exactly. And that's where, if you're not doing it week in, week out, and the difference is when RG Snyman's carrying the ball for Leinster, everyone's thinking offload's on here.
Yeah.
All the French players are thinking that with every player in that team. That's the reality. And it's also how you train. Like, you can't just go into a given week and go, right, let's suddenly be an offloading team. All the drills you do in training, and I know this for a fact with Toulouse, they spend, I'd say, 80% of their time keeping the ball alive. And Guy Noves will flip out when a player gets tackled because he views that as a defeat.
Yeah.
And that's when, you have a breakdown and the opportunity to turn the ball over. The flip side of it is, though, if you can get the French players on the ground, they don't particularly like it. And if you're looking for an offload and you don't get it away, quite often you'll end up on your back, and your head will be facing the defending team, and that's when the turnover opportunities happen.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case last night.
And like a last one of this, because I really want to talk about our attack as well. The soak tackles, the lack of dominant hits, like, is that down to them being bigger, more physical than us? Is that down to they've good footwork at the line so you can't actually hit them the way you want to? You're worried about the pass they might throw or not throw. You're in indecision. Like, why are Ireland? Because even last year, if you take the Six Nations, the top 20 dominant tacklers, only Gibson Park is in the top 20 of the entire tournament last year. And now here we are again, and dominant tackles is a problem. What, like, Ireland should be able to put in some dominant hits, no? Why do you think that's not happening?
No, I think we should, and I don't think just off the back of the game last night that I think that we can't. Coming up against the likes of Guillard, like, what a ball carrier he was. Like, he was skittling our biggest and best tacklers. And
so that was just size in his case. That's just their
size.
It's
size is one thing, but it's also power, and it's also subtle footwork.
Okay.
Quite often the best ball carriers I've played with, like, I think back to, let's say, Sean O'Brien. He had actually really nice subtle footwork right as he's about to get tackled. And the difference with that is, if you're just a big body and you run straight, you're going to get whacked, especially at this international level. But if, a slight bit of deception, a little movement, and you think they're going to be there, and suddenly they're not, you catch them with your bicep as opposed to your shoulder. That's the difference between a dominant tackle and one that's you could potentially slip off.
Yeah, okay. Ireland in attack. We kicked, we chased, we tried it again.
We did, and even when we did pass, there was a clunkiness to our passing. And again, we're talking about international rugby here. It's at the very top level. The margins are so tight, and you have to be able to control the controllables to give, the player who's going to be in possession after you the best chance to read the opposition, pick the best option. And there was a clumsiness to some of our attack. The initial pass from Gibson Park or Josh, or passing in the middle of the field, there was just a lack of accuracy. There was a lack of cohesion. But as regards the kicking itself and the aerial contest, focusing on the first half, we kicked the ball 15 times, of which 40% was contestable, which is actually a great stat, and I'd actually full credit to Gibson Park.
So the kicks themselves good,
putting them in the right areas. Yeah. We won 1 out of the 6 that were contestable.
That's the O'Brien one that leads to Sam Prendergast in a foot race, like, to nick a try. So, like, you can see on paper pre-game, if they felt, God, our kick chase is really going well, we'll defend well, we'll kick chase, we'll play from there. That was their plan, and they would have felt pretty good about it, I'm sure.
They would. And the French kicked the ball 17 times. 17% of those were contestable. They won all 3 of those. Wow. So 3 from 3. So, like, the wash up in the first half is, of the contestable kicks, 8 from 9 the French came out with. And like, my view has kind of changed on this, and it's probably one of the luxuries of having played in multiple different clubs and seeing different cultures and how different teams do it, and talking to different international players. But I'll never forget a conversation I had with Dwayne Vermeulen, and we were talking about getting the ball aerial, kick chase, how to win the scraps. And it's an art form to the South Africans. It's not luck. They don't talk about luck.
Conor
Um,
Murray mentioned luck last night.
yeah, you know, there is elements of luck. I agree with that. It is an oval ball, how it bounces. But there's also, like anything, the more work you put into something, the more you can make the luck sway your way. And what I mean by that is it's how organized you are. The scrum half is box kicking, right? Do you have guys that are just aimlessly chasing? You obviously have one person going up with the ball, and I'll get to him. But is there a player going past the ball if the opposition slap it back? Is there a player who's going to be right underneath where the catch is happening to get a slap back towards your team? Do the players know who is going to be poaching the ball if they win it? Do they know who's going to be counter-rucking if they win it? If worst case scenario, they win it, who is going to be setting the defensive line? And then it's tied in with also what body position are you in? Are you chasing? Are you upright? Because the ball's going to end up on the ground, or are you low hunting the ball? You know, as Pat Lam used to say, ready to detonate the grenade, because that's how important it is. It's such an important part of the game. Um, and teams like England are just going all in on this, all in. And focusing specifically on the player who's chasing the ball. Are they going up to try and catch it clean? Are they going up one-handed to slap it back? If they're slapping it back, are they slapping it to the right or to the left? Because that's important, and that's going to increase your team's chances of winning it back. If you're receiving an oncoming kick, are the players around you telling you whether to jump for it or whether to stay down? Because that didn't happen, and that really cost us. There was one where Tommy O'Brien gets up, jumps for the ball, but he's actually not under pressure. It's not a 1v1 duel. He has time to stay on the ground. What does that give you? The opportunity to beat your opposite man, get an offload away, move the point of contact. Because he jumped, as he lands, he gets hit, and the French come in with a really effective counter ruck, win a penalty on the halfway line. And then before you know it, you go from potentially having a good opportunity in their half, you're now defending on your own 22. So, like, it kills me. And I'm working with Eamon Fell now, who obviously used to play for the Dubs, and he actually laughs. He said, "Oh, we referenced the rugby guys that, you know, we play GAA in Ireland. We should be good at winning the aerial contests." He was like, "This is an art form, winning the aerial contests. Like, it's not because we played GAA when we were growing up."
Yeah. So I'm presuming then you didn't see that level of organisation, and we will come to the player going up for the ball, as you said, in a second, but you didn't see that English level of organisation last night whereby there are various runners going with the main kick chaser, body positions are good, they have a sense of who's doing what, who's going where and why. You didn't see that kind of organisation from Ireland last night?
Not in the detail that the best teams are doing, and that's what we're looking to measure ourselves by.
Strange though,
yeah,
because
of
like,
recent games that we won the aerial contest against Australia.
yeah,
We
but
won the game.
as I write, Australia were abysmal.
Yeah.
I draw a line through the Australia game. They were just shot off a Lions tour. They didn't want to be there. So that doesn't make sense to me in that 2018 we're kind of ruling the skies under Schmidt. You've Sexton in there now. Sexton's talking about this back in November. They've all this time together in Portugal. You know, I'm sure they would have decided on this game plan a little bit out from the match. Like, I just would have thought this would have been drilled really well. And it doesn't strike me as an overly difficult thing to get on top of versus like the intricacy of the Ireland phase attack of 2-3 years ago. Now I can see that takes a lot of work. Like, a kick chase shouldn't be this hard to kind of nail down, or am I underestimating it?
No, and like there was still like big improvements from, like, my big bugbear from the New Zealand game was we weren't even giving the chasers opportunities to get up and compete on enough occasions. Whereas
The kicks
we
were
actually
bad. Yeah.
we actually largely did. Now Prendergast had a few in the second half that have just gone too far.
Yeah.
And you know that, look, there'll be frustrations around that for sure. But focusing on like the box kicking game, we actually were getting it there accurate. Look, we're also measuring one game,
Sure.
and specifically the first half, nine instances. It's not a massive test pool. It's not like this is something that we can still correct and get on top of for
Yeah.
the remainder of the competition.
Okay. Talk to us about the guy going up then. You said you wanted to come to that part.
Oh yeah, well, I've kind of covered it there. It just the detail that the English guys talk about it. You know, what foot are you jumping off? What angle are you landing on? Are you slapping it back to the left, to the right? Are you dominating the aerial space? Understanding the length of the kick is a big one, because if the kick is a fraction too long, maybe it's best off not competing, because that's when you're at risk of yellow and red cards because of the collisions in the air. Um, Ensuring that you're dominating the space, catching catching the ball or tapping the ball back at the apex of your jump. You'll hear these guys talking about hang time in the air. Gravity's gravity, but that's part of the art form. So yeah, it's a huge part of the game, and it's what it provides you with off the back of
Yeah.
winning or losing the ball.
And look, it feels, and I think quite correctly, like Ireland were a gazillion miles off it last night, off France. There's no doubt if they had won their fair share in the air, the complexion of the first half would have been quite different. It did feel, though, like even on a few occasions that even if like Stockdale or O'Brien were going up one-handed, it felt like the French players were jumping up and catching it in the breadbasket, like catching it clean even. It was really kind of just disconcerting feeling that they were just killing us in the air.
Yeah, and look, they got it right, and full credit. I think there was definitely an element of trying to target Biel Barry. Down on our right side, that's typically the better side for us to go down, because it's a better angle for the nine to box kick off. And he's not the tallest of guys or the biggest of frame, but what he does have is a phenomenal spring.
Yeah.
His timing up with the ball, the angle that he catches it at, and he's just a phenomenal rugby player.
Yeah. So they shut that door in the air, and I'm sure there must have been a degree of, God, we'd planned this, we talked about this, we'd envisaged this working. It's really not working. Do we abandon ship? Oh, we've lost our first three. We can't abandon it after three. Let's do four. Let's do five. And suddenly the first half's gone by, and they've scored tries. You said something very interesting though, which we should circle back to. It's part of the attack, that Ireland's catch pass quality, clunky, can't be relied upon. For me, this was the hallmark of Leinster, by extension Ireland, when Irish rugby was at its best in more recent times. And from November 2024, that game against New Zealand, where there were something like 28 handling errors, Ireland's handling has not been as good, not been as crisp. Leinster's handling has not been as good, not been as crisp. Jacques Nienaber has gone into Leinster. They've talked openly about more of a focus on getting defence up to speed because it's a new system, and maybe attack suffered in his first season. Catch pass suffers, in my opinion. Andy Farrell's not with the players every day. There's not much he can do about that. This is now, I put it to you, we need to have a big discussion about this. Like, Joe Schmidt arrived into Leinster and famously said, we're going to become the best passing team in Europe. And that crispness of pass is essential if you're going to play the phase game that Ireland have to play. And there's been this massive change at Leinster. The focus has come off it, and slowly but surely, the standards of our catch pass have gone into just noticeable decline. We almost need like a. Can we have a state of the nation? Can we have like a conference? Is everyone in Irish rugby think this is good? Like, is this we're happy to keep going in this direction? This feels like such a seismic shift and not a good one.
No, it's not, and the other side of it is it's a closed skill as well. Like you don't have to practice your passing as a team. You can also practice it before and after training in and around gym sessions, and that was one thing that Joe Schmidt just drove till the cows come home. The best coaches are doing it. Pat Lam has references that every player has to throw 1,000 passes every week. That compounds.
And you felt that as a player under Joe, did you? And as a team, you could feel the crispness come in.
Very much so, and it was rewarded if you were good at it. Like, I built large parts of my game off it, and he would commend it if it was good. But I remember doing passing drills with Joe, and it was just running commentary from catch it early, don't let the ball dominate you, finish to the target, don't let your hands drop. One of his good ones was catch a bad one, give a good one. because quite often it's a knock-on effect when one bad pass is thrown, it leads to another bad pass, etc.
Yeah.
But he had a full array of other ones, but he would that compound session on session, week on week, and you would know if you had might even be a 3 or 4 minute passing drill, getting yourself into a session. But he would bring this intense focus that he would believe then that's going to tee up the session. And if, God forbid, if I threw a pass and finished hot, didn't finish with my hands to the target, and he said it to me, and then I did another one of those passes in the session, I would know all about it. He would tap me on the shoulder and say, "You're not finishing to your target, and it's hurting you, and it's going to cost us." And it comes back to kind of, it was interesting listening to Conor Murray last night and saying, yeah, it isn't really a culture in the squad of like pulling each other up. And Joe certainly wasn't afraid of doing that. He would have the clips up on, in team meetings, whether it's back sessions or all of us together. And he was never afraid of showing the bad stuff to send a message out and say, if we can get this right, it's going to make a big difference for us. It wasn't to obliterate the individual, but it was always working towards something. But I
was going to say, do you? No, we'll keep talking about this for a second. Don't worry. Do you accept because it's only a theory? Do you accept the Nina bar as something that Leinster has shifted premise and their bulk suppliers therefore?
Yeah, look, there's only so many minutes in a training week, and defence is definitely of much bigger focus in Leinster at the moment, and maybe being a particularly good passer isn't being rewarded. And if other things are, as a player, you're naturally going to focus on those. Okay. That's human nature.
So that leaves Farrell's attack with a problem.
It does. And I think more than ever, we're seeing the disjointedness between the bulk suppliers in Leinster and Ireland and the different systems that the teams are playing. Yeah. If you think back over the last 7 or 8 years, you had real alignment with Joe, you had real alignment with Stuart Lancaster, and look, Leinster are hell-bent on finding a way to win the Champions Cup, and Ireland doing well in the Six Nations isn't their top priority.
Yeah, as is their prerogative. So that's actually tricky. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that certainly is, and you hope that as the weeks compound in during the Six Nations, the Irish systems are going to bed into these players more and more effectively. But like going back to the game last night, like specifically, you're looking at it, you're going, that pass, it's not the biggest of deal. Like that's not that individual pass, that's not the reason we lost. But it's a little 1%er in that passage of play. Totally. If it's a high pass, it affects the line of sight of the person catching it. If it's a low one, you're thinking of just giving the next one accurately as opposed to potentially assessing what's on for you. Our short side attack is something that has usually been a real strength of Ireland's game, and it's a real strength of Gibson Park's game. And all the top scrum halves in the world have to be good at it because it's the easiest way to get back over the gain line. And there was sometimes when we were chopping back the short side last night, we were coming into brick walls. And then there was other times when we were coming back and it was on, but we were picking the wrong option, or the quality of our pass wasn't crisp enough, that a good opportunity was then turned into, oh, it's just a gain line. It's okay. We made gain line. That's positive. But no, the reality is you actually missed a gilt-edged opportunity there.
Yeah. I guess he's always talked about a little bit. How did Prendergast go at 10 for you?
I think parts of the game he did really well. Like you look at that kind of hot spell that we had in the second half where we get the 2 tries and then we're pushing for a third. His ability to pull defenders out of the line, play long, play short, go, like he carried the ball well himself a few times, was really good. But we're talking about a 15-minute spell. There was parts of his game that he'll be disappointed with, and I think he'll be frustrated with players around him as well. There's a couple of opportunities that he would have wanted players to do different things than what they did, and you think the game's really getting away from us at 29-0. We get a good opportunity around our 10-meter line. The game's kind of breaking up at this stage, and he's got Crowley on his shoulder. Nick Timney runs a short line, and then Jacob is kind of on the long ball. And I just think it's a combination of like poor communication, poor running lines, and then a poor option taking from Prendergast. It's always a multitude of things that's going to result in an intercept like that. But that was a disappointing passage of play for me.
Yeah.
Um,
And
the,
I'm not looking for you to toast him. What aspect of his game would he be disappointed with, do you think?
I think the inconsistency of it.
Okay.
Um, even in the first half, we're trying to get ourselves back into it. We go down the short side. He plays a short ball to Tig. Tig knocks it on. Like at the time, you're thinking, oh, it's not the end of the world, but it is. Like you're 12-0 down. That needs to be caught. We need to get gain line.
Hmm.
It would have been a frustrating game for him because he would have felt in the first half he just couldn't get a foothold into the game. But he was partly guilty for that himself. Like he goes for the offload. Part of the responsibility of throwing an offload is to ensure that it is caught. And on 8 minutes to have sustained pressure in the French 22 is absolutely vital. And we cough the ball up on first phase, and we don't get back into their 22 for the remainder of the half.
Well, this is the insidious aspect of the catch pass going into decline, which was so good and so sharp when Ireland were at their peak. In isolation, you just say, ah, oh, one of those things. But like the contagion effect, the compounding effect is enormous, you know. So that's why it's such a big, big problem. Did you feel, oh, Crowley on second playmaker, this is something we need to explore?
Um, I think when you're chasing a game, I think it's a smart play.
Okay, but from the off, not necessarily like at Twickenham, you wouldn't be calling for Crowley to go in somewhere beside him.
I think if you're talking about playing Crowley at 12, I think what the performance that Stu McCluskey put on the field last night was really underrated. Like you need his size and his bulk to be able to hang in there. And there was lots of instances last night that I was watching it going, we're in big trouble here. And oh wow, geez, Stu's done really well to keep his feet there or to keep the ball alive, or to soak up the pressure. And we've been able to survive another phase. And then he went through his own kind of hot spell for about part of that kind of 15 minute, and showed what he can do when the team does get fun football.
Mm.
But taking on a side like England and Twickenham, you need a big body at 12 and someone who has the ability to keep their feet and be a good decision maker. For one of the weaker teams, to be honest, I don't even think we have that luxury now. I think we've just got to play our best side in all of these games. Otherwise, we've the potential of getting beaten in one of the games at home. So I'm not sure the coaches will look at that as an option.
Yeah. I sort of said the topic, it copper fastens the sense that, 2020, late 24 into 25, that's not just like, that was a bad window. Oh, that was a bad game. The memory of 23 is still there. We're still a really good team. I think everyone now is fully acceptant of the fact that like it's done. That 23 team and that approach, there's a new era, a new team has to be. I don't like who's coming to replace a lot of these players who just look a little lethargic or flat or like they need to be taken out or need to be recharged or dispensed with entirely. Like it was kind of funny, even Nick Timoney came on and there was just like a life to him. And there's a staleness to so many of these players, whether it's lines fatigue, whether it's they put their life and soul into 23 and they just can't get that excitement back into it, whether the bodies are just a bit more bashed up. But that Bundy Aki, I will run through several doors in the 23 World Cup. That sense of punch that this team had for a while is kind of gone. And you see someone like Timoney, who's in good form for Ulster, go in, and like he was able to translate it. You almost wonder, like, okay, there's no one obvious, like, lighting it up or taking places at Munster, Leinster. Like, is Farrell going to have to get, like, a bit radical here and just take the Timoney thing and say, right, I'm just throwing in guys who they mightn't be as good as some of the other, the bigger names, but, like, there's a freshness to them or a vitality. Or is that a crazy thing to suggest? And actually, the difference between club and test is night and day. And you could throw in all these players, and in 5-6 games, like I could basically be getting sacked because the bottom has fallen out and you've disrupted the whole team, and that is just not the way of the world. And I would accept that if that's your answer. It's just it feels like this team needs something kind of radical to just jolt it back to life.
Yeah, like look, there's loads in that. First thing I'd say is there isn't loads of players tearing up trees
I
at
know.
provincial
I,
level,
I
putting
was
their
trying to
hand up.
think like, give me six other players of Timone's kind of vibe I can mention, and I was like, I don't have any. I want them to be there, but I don't.
Yeah, like someone like Joshua Kenny who has done really well with the opportunities he's got for Leinster, but look, he's still very raw, and we've seen that in some of the Champions Cup games that he's played. Um, I think the expectations for this Irish team need to be realigned.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that's probably happening. You look at games against South Africa, New Zealand, France, and England. Of the last 11 games, we've won 3 of those. That's kind of where we're at. What's a good Six Nations for us? Ensuring that we win our 3 home games and we're competitive against England. But I think on your question of like what Andy Farrell has to do, he needs to probably realign the game plan that suits this team and makes us really hard to play against, really effective when we do get our opportunities in attack. And you do need to pick those foreign players. Like if someone's tearing trees up in training, put them in. Like and Nick Timoney's been really consistent. The reason he looks fresh is because he is fresh.
yeah.
He hasn't played loads of international games. He wasn't on the Lions tour. He's hungry. He's a point to prove. The Lions tour has been an absolute disaster for us. Like the disjointed effect that it had with Farrell not coaching Ireland last season. The players have come back and they're tired. That's just the cold hard facts of it. You think of James Lowe, Sheehan, and I'm not saying these guys are playing badly. I'm saying that they've set an extremely high bar for themselves and they're not reaching that high bar. And going through it, like it's one thing saying these things, and I don't like doing it. Like I'm always trying to be positive, right? And look, to give some of these guys an out as well, because I think the world of them, and like no one's a bigger Irish supporter than I am, and I'd love to see us turning this around. But like if you look at Caelan Doris's meters per carry last season versus this season, you're looking at 4.8 meters last season, 3.6 meters this season. That's 20% down. Post contact meters, which is, I love that stat, and France killed us in it last night. It's hard to get those numbers instantly, but he was averaging 3 meters post contact last season. He's now averaging 1.7. It's a 40% drop. You're talking about 1%ers. I'd say Sheehan is probably somewhere similar. He's not as impactful. I haven't been able to go through it with the same detail. You think of the carry that James Lowe had against Mitchell in the England game in the sixth. Like it was just so powerful.
Yeah.
It had a fend, it had footwork, it had an offload. Have we seen that from him for Leinster much this season? No, we haven't. And these guys, they're probably carrying some form of injuries as well. Obviously, Caelan had a serious shoulder surgery. I know I got shoulder reconstruction back in 2009. It took me a full year to feel. Now, I'm obviously not doing what he's doing, but it took me a full year to have confidence in it. And that's both carrying and tackling. So, yeah, look, the Lions has really, really hurt us, and it can be challenging off the back of a performance like that when the team is flat. And I've said this before, trying to turn that around in the space of a week is really difficult. Like, what do you do? Play five-a-side soccer on Monday? You don't have that luxury.
Yeah. And like Farrell is just such kind of, well documented emotional intelligence, inspirational factor. That's why it was quite jarring for him to say, God, the lack of intent, it wasn't there. Because you sort of feel 10 days in Portugal with Farrell, there's going to be plenty of intent. So that must have worried him in many respects. Like it's funny.
On that though, like
Yeah.
when you talk about Portugal, like the set piece, like to give the guys credit, like the line out was immaculate.
Perfect,
and the scrum,
Yeah.
really held up well. Like full credit to Jeremy and Clarkson. I thought they both, and the guys who came off the bench, Milner did really well, and so did Finley when he came on, and that was kind of everyone's big concern. I wasn't actually overly concerned about the scrum. The French scrum isn't amazing. It's good. But also there was enough stock there that the guys who were picked had performed against the top French opposition already and done well. But you still lose a bit around the pitch, like what Porter gives you in his carry, what Ty gives you in his ball playing and his carry. We did miss a bit of that.
There's a lot of mitigation. Lou said decimated, Furlong, Hansen, Hugo Keenan for sure. I was just going to say, like, it's funny, that line that a lot of people have noted that Conor Murray had. It was when we were discussing Prendergast and, like, does Prendergast get called out in camp? Like, is there someone with, like, on a giant screen going, Sam, this is a disgraceful effort at a tackle? Does that happen? And he sort of said, oh, we don't really have that culture of calling each other out. And a lot of people have picked up on it. I'm in two minds about it. Like, it's worked for them pretty well so far. You know what I mean? And so you have to kind of give Farrell the benefit of the doubt that he understands players and that he's created a very good culture. So maybe we shouldn't all pounce on that now that results aren't going well. I'm also, though, sort of mindful of that line that Will mentioned, the Eddie Jones quote at the Helix on Friday, where Jones, it's such a great comment. You know, managerial appointments are often reactionary to the previous manager. And Eddie Jones, the basic paraphrasing the quote is, your strengths initially, what gets you success initially in a job, costs you the job in the end. And so, to use the obvious Irish examples here, Joe Schmidt comes on, he holds on tight. Every detail he's across, it is a vice-like control of the group. Success happens, but in the end, it's too tight and it costs them. Andy Farrell comes in, and it's more relaxed, and they flourish. And now, like, if you were to build a theory, you could say, well, the habits of Joe, the discipline of Joe, they sort of just live on because they're in the DNA of the players for the first couple of years of Farrell. And you've got Sexton there, I suspect. I somehow think he was calling people out. You know, I think he was a calling person, a people out culture. And I know he's still in there, but maybe it's ebbed a little and it's become a little kind of flabby. And maybe, like, would Joe McCarthy feel like he could give away that penalty he gave away last night under Joe Schmidt? You know, like a year on from the drag back against France. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. Would people feel okay, like dropping balls and the catch pass getting sloppy with Joe? Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But do you think there's anything in that things have become just a little flabby around standards in the team? And we're all on the outside and we're kind of putting two and two together and maybe getting five.
Yeah, look, and I've no doubt that the coaching team and the players are working their socks off.
Yeah.
But what I would say about, like, rugby, and it's a great game because you've got a decision to make, and a lot of the time you're under serious pressure, the risk of getting absolutely smashed, or you're dealing with, like, serious lactic in your legs. But there's always a decision to make. Do you want to push a little bit harder, or do you want to take it a little bit easier? And the kick chase is the easiest thing to measure there. And if you have a coach that, like, sporadically in team meetings reviews effort and kick chase and says, right, everyone look at Ian Madigan here in this clip. Like, that is the worst nightmare if you are not working hard when you're chasing back. Or the flip side, he goes, look at Ian Madigan here, and you're leading the kick chase, and you get up, you make a tackle, you get up again, you make another tackle, and you feel like an absolute rock star. But you're doing tasks that, you know, anyone on the street could really do. It's just effort, right? But that fear factor does drive you on. It is, like we used to always say as players, we played with Joe on our shoulder because he made it clear what we wanted and he set the standards really high. If that's not the focus, it is naturally going to wane over time, and maybe that's something that they're going to have to bring in. And they've got the right person in there and Johnny to drive it, because, you know, he was the standard bearer in Leinster and Ireland for all the time that he was playing. He knows what good looks like. He knows how to implement it, whether it's in training sessions, in video sessions, and ensuring that it goes into games.
Yeah. Yeah, like, Farrell's no teddy bear. He's an intimidating dude.
No.
O'Connell, Sexton. I know Murray said that. I just can't imagine that environment where they're seeing things that they don't think are up to scratch effort-wise and are not calling it out. I'd be surprised. Maybe it's within the playing group he meant, you know, that way. It could be just a self-policing group is a powerful thing too. I don't know. Any final thoughts as we head to Italy, Dublin, and then Twickenham? Because there's like do we ring the changes? And people, no. But equally, like, this is the first Six Nations where there's no rest week after the first two rounds. So, I mean, do you throw everyone out again against Italy and then say this group that we already think is a bit tired, and now you go to Twickenham 3 weeks in a row. I think he, like, whatever about form and everything, he actually just may have to give guys a rest with Twickenham in mind.
Yeah, there's plenty of water to pass under the bridge between now and the team getting picked as well. You know, we've got the Ireland A game this evening against England, really good England team. So like that has serious credit to it. If you perform well, you're going to be in with a very good chance of being involved. Back to our point of picking form. Someone tears trees up tonight, they're going to be in the 23, potentially starting.
Okay.
How the Scotland Italy game goes is also important. If Italy look really good and they are an improving side. Now, what I will say about them is they've consistently been really poor when we've played them in the Aviva for as long as I can remember. And I don't want to unnecessarily be talking them up. But if they play really well against Scotland and then suddenly they're looking at our vulnerabilities going, maybe we'll have a crack here. The style of play that's needed to beat Italy is very different to the style of play needed to beat France. So Farrell's going to be looking to plug in players to implement that game plan. So it's not going to be changes for change's sake. It's going to be changes to ensure that we get a bonus point win, because that's exactly what's needed, and ideally close the gap on that points difference.
Yeah.
But how the fixtures are laid out, having England round 3 is a disaster for us. If there was one team that I would have asked to avoid at round 3, it would have been them. And then we've a week off, and then we play, perceived one of the weaker teams in the competition in Wales. That's ideally when we would have been playing England.
Yeah. Now, England will be at Murrayfield in round 2.
Yeah.
And that's a real
that's a really tough
banana skin for them in recent times. That's bogey side territory, you know what I mean? So who knows how that goes, and then suddenly their Grand Slams up in smoke and they're very excited media start getting on top of them. So like it's a lifetime away. That's the nature of the Six Nations, I suppose.
Yeah, totally. And look, Ireland have just got to focus on the controllables, and that's getting momentum back into their training sessions and trying to get that mojo, that confidence back. There was definitely a little bit of a mindset at the weekend of I don't want to make mistakes, as opposed to I want to make something happen.
Yeah.
And that's confidence. It's a hard thing to measure, but it's an easy thing to see. And that's the reality of where we're at.
Okay. Really interesting. Loads of great stuff there. Thank you so much, Ian Madigan. And I think we're in studio for Italy Scotland tomorrow. So I'll
good. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, see you tomorrow, and then we'll talk next week and we'll go from there. Ian, thanks a lot, man. Cheers.
Thanks a million, Joe. Appreciate you having me on.